She pressed a pregnant woman against the hood of a police cruiser and called it procedure. The handcuffs bit into Naomi Carter's wrists while her free hand drifted toward the curve of her belly, 7 months full, and Officer Brennan leaned in close and said the thing she would repeat all the way down. "I know what I'm doing." She did not know that in 40 hours, the quiet woman she was bending over the hood would be sitting behind a federal bench, deciding cases exactly like the one she was about to create. By the end of it, the officer so certain of her badge would lose that badge, her pension, and the legal shield she thought made her untouchable. So what did Diane Brennan do in the next 4 minutes that ended an 11-year career? The road to that exact moment had begun 36 hours earlier, on an ordinary Thursday, in an ordinary parking lot. Naomi Carter was 39 years old, and she walked out of the obstetrics office on Lattimore Avenue, carrying a folder of ultrasound photos and a warning she intended to ignore. Her blood pressure was a little high. The doctor had said the words gently, the way doctors do when they want you to hear them without panicking. Rest more, stress less, let other people carry the heavy things for a while. Naomi had smiled and promised nothing. She had spent her whole life carrying heavy things, and she was not sure she remembered how to set them down. She crossed the lot to her car. It was an old gray Volvo, 15 years old, with a dent in the rear door she had never bothered to fix, and a child's sunshade already suctioned to the back window, waiting. She lowered herself into the driver's seat slowly, one hand on the small of her back, and set the folder on the passenger seat beside a thick stack of legal briefs bound in pale blue covers. The top cover read United States District Court, Eastern District. A sticky note on it said, in her own handwriting, Monday, 9 in the morning. She did not look at it twice. She had read every page already. She always did. Naomi did not come from any of this. She grew up in a narrow house in a part of Cleveland where the buses ran late and the streetlights ran later. Her mother pressed other people's shirts for a living, and her father loaded freight until his knees gave out, and neither of them ever raised their voices. Not once, not even when raising a voice would have been the honest thing to do. They taught her something money never could. That power did not need volume. That the loudest person in the room was almost never the strongest. She had carried that lesson through a scholarship, through law school, through 14 years of cases nobody wanted, and finally to a seat that fewer than 1,000 people in the entire country would ever hold. A federal judge. She had been confirmed 8 months ago. She still parked far from the door out of habit. Her phone buzzed against the cup holder. It was her clerk, a sharp young man named Daniel. Judge Carter, just confirming the Monday calendar. The Halverson matter, the suppression hearing, and the civil rights complaint against the county got moved up. They're asking if you can take the 9 in the morning slot. I can take it, she said. Send me the brief tonight. Already in your inbox. How are you feeling? Like I'm carrying a watermelon that has opinions. He laughed. And she ended the call, and she pulled out of the lot toward home. Home was 40 minutes north, in a quiet development called Brookhaven Glen, the kind of neighborhood with a stone gate at the entrance and lawns that looked ironed. She and her husband had bought the house 2 years ago, before the appointment, when the second income from his architecture firm had finally made it possible. Naomi was aware every single day that she did not look the way the rest of the neighborhood expected a Brookhaven Glen homeowner to look. She had made her peace with the glances. She told herself the glances were not her problem. Most days she even believed it. She did not notice the cruiser at first. It slid in behind her about a mile from the gate, 2 car lengths back, and it stayed there. She drove the way she always drove. A few miles under the limit, both hands on the wheel out of an instinct older than her judgeship. The cruiser followed her through one turn, then another, Then the lights came on, red and blue washing across her dashboard like a sudden weather. Naomi felt her pulse jump, and she made herself breathe. She put on her signal. She pulled to the shoulder, smooth and slow, and she put the car in park. Then she did what she had once, years ago, advised an entire courtroom of young attorneys to teach their own children. She placed both hands on the top of the steering wheel in plain view. Fingers spread, and she waited. She did not reach for the glove box. She did not reach for her phone. She waited. In the side mirror, she watched the officer approach. A woman, mid-40s, sandy hair pulled back tight, one hand resting on the grip of her holstered weapon in a way that was not quite necessary. A second officer, younger, stayed near the cruiser half a step behind, watching. The nameplate on the woman's chest read Brennan. The badge number, when it caught the light, was 4471. License and registration, Brennan said. No greeting. No reason. Good afternoon, officer, Naomi said, keeping her voice even and warm. My registration is in the glove box and my license is in my bag on the passenger seat. I'm going to reach for them slowly. I want you to see everything I'm doing. I asked for your license. May I ask what I'm being stopped for? It was a fair question. It was, in fact, the central question of half the cases on Naomi's docket. A traffic stop in this country is not supposed to begin with nothing. An officer needs what the law calls reasonable suspicion, a specific and articulable reason to believe a law has been broken. Not a feeling, not a hunch, not the shape of a driver against the shape of a neighborhood. Naomi had written those words into opinions. She had read them aloud from the bench. She asked the question the way any citizen has the right to ask it, calm and clear. Brennan's jaw tightened. There was a report of a stolen vehicle in the area. Gray sedan. You match the description. I'm happy to help you clear that up, Naomi said. This car is registered to me. The registration will show that. Step out of the vehicle. Naomi did not move right away. Officer, I'm 7 months pregnant, and I'm fully cooperating. If you'll let me hand you my registration, you'll see this isn't a stolen car. There's no reason for me to get out. This was the first refusal, though no one watching would have called it that yet. Naomi held out the registration, which she had eased from the glove box with 2 fingers, plainly, slowly. She held it through the open window like an offering. And Diane Brennan, badge 4471, did not take it. She glanced at the paper the way a person glances at something they have already decided to ignore, and she let it hang there in the air between them. Anybody can print one of those, Brennan said. The younger officer shifted his weight. Brennan, he said quietly, the plate came back clean. It's registered to a Carter, this address. I heard dispatch, Reyes. She did not look at him. Step out of the car, ma'am. I'm not going to ask again. Down the street, a man washing his car in his driveway had stopped washing his car. He was holding the hose at his side, water running uselessly onto the pavement, and he was watching. After a moment, he set the hose down and lifted his phone, and a small red dot began to blink in the late afternoon light, the way those dots always seem to find these moments and hold them. Naomi's mind did the thing it had trained itself to do for 14 years. It began to count. The stop without a stated, lawful basis. That was 1. The refusal to inspect the registration that would have ended the encounter in 10 seconds. That was 2. The order to exit a vehicle absent any reason beyond the officer's own mood. She knew the law allowed an officer to order a driver out of a car during a lawful stop. She also knew the stop had to be lawful to begin with, and that everything built on a rotten foundation falls the same way the foundation does. 3. I'd like to understand the legal basis for asking me to step out, Naomi said. Her voice never rose. And I'd like to make a phone call. You don't get to negotiate, Brennan snapped. Out now. Naomi looked at her for 1 long second. Then, because she was carrying a child, and because a woman alone on a shoulder does the math that keeps her child safe, she reached for the door handle to comply. She was moving. She was doing what she had been told. It was not fast enough. Brennan pulled the door open the rest of the way, took Naomi by the upper arm, and pulled. Naomi came out of the seat off balance, one hand flying instinctively to her belly, the other grabbing for the door frame and missing. "I'm pregnant," she said, louder now. The first time all afternoon her voice had carried any edge at all. "Please, I am 7 months pregnant. Hands behind your back. I am not resisting. I am telling you that I am." The world narrowed to a few small, terrible details. The cold press of the cruiser's hood against her cheek. The click of the cuffs, too tight, ratcheting one notch past necessary. A single dry leaf turning over in the gutter beside the front tire. Her own breath, held, then released in a thin shaking line. And Diane Brennan's voice, close to her ear, calm in the way that only certainty can be calm. "I know what I'm doing." Officer Reyes had gone very still by the cruiser. The man down the street had stopped pretending he wasn't filming, and Naomi Carter, cheek against the warm metal, hands bound behind her, did not scream and did not threaten and did not say the one sentence that would have ended all of it in an instant. She closed her eyes, she breathed for two, and she felt the baby move. Reyes finally stepped forward. "Brennan, I'm telling you, the registration matched. We need to slow this down." She refused to comply. "That's on the report." Brennan's hand was still on the back of Naomi's shoulder, pinning her lightly to the hood. "Run her license. Let's see who she really is." Reyes took the bag Naomi nodded toward, found the wallet, found the license. He read it again, and the color went out of his face the way water goes out of a cracked glass, all at once, leaving nothing behind. "Brennan," his voice had changed. "Brennan, you need to come look at this. Just run it." "I ran it." He swallowed. "It's Judge Carter, Naomi Carter, United States District Court." He looked up, and his eyes moved from the license to the woman bent over the hood of their car. "She's a federal judge." For a moment, nothing on the shoulder moved at all. A truck passed in the far lane, and its wind pushed at them and died. Brennan's hand was still on Naomi's shoulder. She had not let go. "That doesn't change anything," she said, but something in her voice had thinned. She still refused a lawful order. "I had a description. I followed protocol." This is the part people always misunderstand about a fall. It is almost never one push. It is a person standing at the edge, being handed chance after chance to step back, and choosing every single time to lean forward instead. A second cruiser rolled up behind the first. The door opened, and a heavy-set man in a sergeant's uniform climbed out, frowning at the scene, at the cuffed woman, at the man filming from the driveway. Sergeant Hollis had been on the force for 22 years and had supervised Diane Brennan for the last 6 of them. He came around the front of the car to take charge, opened his mouth to ask what they had, and then he saw the woman's face. The frown fell off his own face like something cut loose. "Your Honor," Hollis said. He said it before he could think better of it. Said it the way you say a thing your body knows before your brain catches up. Because Sergeant Hollis had stood in Judge Carter's courtroom twice in the last 6 months, once to testify and once to watch a colleague testify, and he knew exactly whose wrists were in those cuffs. "Your Honor," he said again, quieter, and then he turned to Brennan, and his voice came out as something close to a plea. "Brennan, take the cuffs off. Take them off right now." Naomi did not gloat. She had no interest in gloating. When Reyes, with shaking hands, unlocked the cuffs, she straightened slowly, rubbed each wrist once, and pressed both palms flat against her belly until she felt the baby settle. Then she looked at Diane Brennan, and she did not raise her voice because she had learned a very long time ago, in a narrow house with a mother who never shouted, that the strongest thing in any room is almost never the loudest. "I'm going to ask you one question, Officer Brennan," she said. "If I had been exactly who you decided I was, would any of this have been acceptable?" Brennan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You didn't stop a stolen car." Naomi said. "There was no stolen car. You stopped a gray sedan in a neighborhood where you had already decided I didn't belong. And when I handed you the one piece of paper that would have proven you wrong, you wouldn't even look at it. I want you to understand something. I'm not telling you this because of who I am. I'm telling you because of who you would have done it to if I had been nobody at all. That is the entire problem. That has always been the entire problem." Sergeant Hollis was already on his radio, his voice low and urgent. Reyes stood with the open handcuffs hanging from his fingers, staring at them as if he had never seen them before. And Diane Brennan, badge 4471, who had every chance in that moment to say the two simplest words in the language, said instead, "I followed procedure." She would keep saying it. She would say it to the union representative who arrived that night and assured her this was all a misunderstanding that would blow over. She would say it to the internal affairs investigators the following week. She would say it long after everyone around her had stopped believing it, because admitting the truth would have meant looking at something she had spent 11 years refusing to see. The video reached the internet at 8:47 that evening. The man from the driveway, whose name was Walter Briggs, a retired schoolteacher, had hesitated for almost an hour before posting it. He was not a man who liked attention, but he kept watching the footage. The moment where the woman said, "I am 7 months pregnant," and the officer pulled her out anyway. And finally he uploaded it with a single line of caption. "Officer pulls pregnant woman from her own car in her own neighborhood. Turns out she is a federal judge. Watch the whole thing." By midnight it had 200,000 views. By morning it was on the news. The clip of Brennan's voice, low and certain, saying "I know what I'm doing," was cut out and looped and shared until it became its own small piece of the country's vocabulary. People who had never heard of Brookhaven Glen, who had never been pulled over a day in their lives, and people who had been pulled over 100 times for nothing, watched the same 30 seconds and felt the same thing rise in their chests. Recognition. The specific, exhausting fury of watching a thing happen to someone else that has already happened to you, and seeing it, this time, on camera. But here is what the comment sections did not know yet, and what made the story bigger than one bad stop. This was not the first time. Diane Brennan had a pattern, and the pattern had been protected. The internal affairs investigation took 9 days, and it found what such investigations almost always find when someone finally bothers to look. Over the previous 4 years, Brennan had been the subject of 6 complaints alleging that she stopped, searched, and detained drivers of color without cause. 2 of the complaints had been formally filed. Both had been routed to Sergeant Hollis, and both had been marked reviewed, no further action, without a single follow-up interview. Hollis admitted, in a closed session that would later become very public, that he had been trying to protect a difficult officer in a difficult job. He admitted he had told himself she was a good cop having a bad year 4 years in a row. The complaints had names attached to them, and the names came forward. A man named Marcus Webb, 31, an accountant, told a local reporter that Brennan had stopped him 2 years earlier as he drove home from work, ordered him out of his car at gunpoint, and searched the vehicle for 20 minutes before letting him go without a citation, without an apology, without a reason. He had filed a complaint he had never heard back. "I watched that video of the judge," Webb said, "and I felt every second of it because I lived it. The only difference is nobody was filming me. Nobody believed me. There was no proof. There was just my word against a badge." A woman named Tanya Brooks, a nurse, described being pulled over near the same gate and searched while her 2 passengers, both of them senior citizens she was driving home from dialysis, sat terrified in the car. And Officer Daniel Reyes, the young man who had stood frozen on the shoulder, did the hardest thing a person in his position can do. He told Internal Affairs the truth, all of it on the record, knowing exactly what it would cost him among certain people who wore the same uniforms. The thing that broke the protection open, in the end, was not the video, though the video mattered. It was the body camera. Brennan's own camera had recorded the entire encounter, audio and all, and a body camera is the one witness a union cannot discredit and a sergeant cannot bury. It captured the stop with no stated lawful basis. It captured the refused registration. It captured "I am 7 months pregnant. Please," and it captured the answer, "I know what I'm doing." When the footage came out, the union representative, who had promised Brennan this would blow over, stopped returning her calls. Diane Brennan was terminated from the department on a Tuesday morning. The letter cited use of excessive force, unlawful detention, and a pattern of conduct violating the constitutional rights of the citizens she had sworn to protect. She lost her position. She lost her pension, the one she had been 11 years from collecting in full, and in the civil suit that followed, the court stripped away the protection she had been counting on all along, the legal doctrine called qualified immunity, which shields officers from personal liability so long as they have not violated what the law calls clearly established rights. The court found that the right of a pregnant woman not to be yanked from her car and cuffed during a baseless stop was about as clearly established as a right can be. The shield was gone. The case against her and against the county that had let her pattern run unchecked for 4 years went forward. Naomi Carter testified once briefly in the civil matter, not as a judge but as a witness, sitting in the same kind of chair every other witness sits in. She did not raise her voice there either. She described what happened in plain, exact words, and when the county's attorney asked whether she had announced her position during the stop, she said no. She said she had not announced it because no citizen should have to be a federal judge to be treated like a human being on the side of the road. That single sentence ran in newspapers across the country. The settlement, when it came, was substantial, and Naomi insisted on something that money usually cannot buy. As part of the agreement, the county entered into a consent decree with the federal government, a binding court-enforced plan to fix what was broken. The Department of Justice opened what is called a pattern or practice investigation, the kind that examines not one officer but the whole machine that produced her. And the consent decree that followed required real things. Body cameras activated on every stop, with no discretion to turn them off. A civilian oversight board with actual authority to review complaints, so that the next Marcus Webb, the next Tanya Brooks, would never again file a complaint into a silence. Independent tracking of every stop, by reason and outcome, published where the public could see it. A portion of the settlement money was set aside to fund the oversight board for its first 10 years, so that accountability would not quietly run out of money the way these things so often do. Diane Brennan never admitted she had done anything wrong. In her last interview, given to a small outlet that would talk to her, she said she had been made into a scapegoat, that she had followed her training, that she had done her job. She used the word procedure 4 times. Sergeant Hollis took an early retirement, his record permanently marked for the complaints he had buried. Officer Daniel Reyes was quietly reassigned, and though some of his colleagues never forgave him for telling the truth, he was the last anyone heard, still on the force, still doing the work, and still able to look at himself in the mirror, which is more than most of the people in this story could say. Naomi Carter went back to the bench. 3 months after the stop, on a gray Monday morning, she sat in her chambers before the day's calendar, with a newborn daughter asleep against her chest in a soft carrier. 6 weeks old, impossibly small. The hearing that morning was a civil rights matter. A man alleging he had been wrongly detained, his rights ignored. It was not her case. It would never be her case. She would hear it the way she heard all of them, with the patience of a person who knew, in her own body, exactly how it felt to be a name on a report instead of a human being in a car. She looked down at her daughter. The baby's hand had worked free of the blanket, and her tiny fingers had closed around Naomi's index finger, gripping it with the fierce, total, trusting strength of a child who believes, with her whole new heart, that the hand holding hers will never let go. Naomi sat with that for a moment. The cuffs had closed around her wrists on a quiet street 6 weeks before this small hand was born. She thought about that. And then she thought about all the people whose wrists had been closed in cuffs with no one filming, no badge of their own to fall back on, no judge's chair waiting on Monday morning. She had not been able to save herself from that afternoon. But the work she did now, in this room with this small weight asleep against her, was the only kind of revenge she had ever wanted. Not punishment. The truth, on the record, where it could not be buried. She kissed the top of her daughter's head. She gently freed her finger, one knuckle at a time, from that tiny, determined grip, and then Judge Naomi Carter rose and smoothed her robe over the place where, not long ago, she had carried her child past a woman who could not see her. And she walked out to take the bench, to give a stranger the one thing she had been denied on the side of a road. To be seen, to be heard, to be treated before anything else as a person. Some hands are extended to help. Some are closed into fists, and some reach for a pair of handcuffs when a registration would have done. The measure of a person is never in the badge they carry. It is in how they treat the people they believe can do nothing for them, on a quiet road, when they are certain no one is watching. What would you have done if you were standing where Naomi stood that afternoon, alone on that shoulder, with no one to call and everything to lose? Drop your answer in the comments. I read everyone. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. This story is a work of fiction. The names, characters, businesses, places, departments, and events are products of the imagination and used in a dramatized way. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real agencies or incidents, is entirely coincidental. The legal and procedural details, however, are drawn from how these systems genuinely work, and that part is real. I keep coming back to one thing in this story. Naomi never told that officer who she was, not because she forgot, and not as some clever trap, but because she believed, all the way down, that she should not have to be a federal judge to be treated like a human being on the side of a road. That stays with me. Because most of us will never have a title to fall back on in our worst moments. We are just a person in a car, hoping the other person sees us. The real lesson here is not that the powerful eventually wins. It is that dignity is something you owe to everyone, especially the people you think can do nothing for you. How we treat them when we think no one is watching, that is the whole truth of who we are. Everything else is just the uniform.